Joining us now to talk a little bit more about the politics of today, former press secretary to House Speakers John Boehner and Paul Ryan, and MSNBC political analyst Brendan Buck, also former chief spokesperson for Vice President Kamala Harris and co-host of The Weekend here on MSNBC, Symone Sanders Townsend. All right, Symone, what is the political line the White House is walking on immigration?
Well, look, I think what you laid out at the top after the president's remarks, Katie, I think is very important. That there was a bill that Congress had negotiated feverishly over a very long period of time, that was ready to be put on the floor, voted upon, and frankly would have passed, that had very tough restrictions in it as it related to immigration, things that a lot of progressives that I know were not particularly fans of. And it was Donald Trump that tanked that bill. Things like immigration reform, tax policy, all these kind of things are things that should go through Congress. Joe Biden is a former senator. Okay, he's been elected official longer than I've been alive, and he believes not legislating by executive orders or executive actions. That's something I heard him say a number of times when I worked for him. So the fact that he has now taken 2 actions on immigration using the power of the pen, executive actions, is notable because Congress was unable to do their job, much like 12 years ago when President Obama took action with his pen on DACA because Congress did not do their job. The president has now stepped in and done what he could on enforcement actions, but also on something that affects, frankly, almost a large portion of those DACA recipients from 12 years ago. The DACA population has not grown substantially over the last 12 years because of a number of the restrictions on the programs, right? To be a DACA recipient in 2012, you had to have been in this country by 2007, and because of the restrictions years past, it hasn't grown. So it's about 530 folks in that program, 500,000 people, a little over 500,000. 50% of those DACA recipients, those people in that initial cohort, they now are married. They now have families, right? These are individuals that are going to benefit from the program that the president is announcing today. Folks who are American in every sense of the word, except on paper, and Joe Biden is trying to do something about that.
I remember interviewing a lot of them when DACA first passed or when the executive action was first done, and they were just entering college. They were kids who had been here since they were babies, who only knew America as their home. And the idea of being deported to somewhere that they'd never been before, somewhere they knew nothing about, somewhere they had no family, was a persistent worry, was a persistent fear for them as they were moving through life. Also, a lot of them didn't even know that they weren't documented until they got to a point where they needed to try to get a driver's license. And they realized then that they didn't have the papers to do that. What are the political risks here for the president, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, the president clearly tried to present himself as leaning forward, being a strong leader on this issue. I think that, and in fact, there aren't politics at play. It feels to me a little bit more like this is a person who is sort of twisting in the wind on this issue. Well, everything that you said about the Senate failing to pass that bill is absolutely true. And yet he still continues to be trailing pretty significantly on any polling on this issue. And Donald Trump is continuing to set the tone on it. And all of the actions to strengthen border security, as you said, clearly upset the left. And this is just sort of the whiplash reaction. I have a hard time believing that he would have done this had he not upset a lot of progressives in Congress and the activist community. That said, I think it's actually pretty good politics for him. One, to keep the left at bay and keep them in a better place and in the activist community, but also to put a better face on the people that Donald Trump is threatening a mass deportation of. The president can talk all about what he's doing on this issue, and it feels like it's not really getting him very far. But if he can turn the script and talk about what Donald Trump may potentially do, he's talking about deporting 20 million Americans. And if you can change the face of those people to people who are patriotic, people who have been here for a very long time, I think that could benefit him to a certain degree. But all of this matters if he can actually take advantage of this, because to date, none of what he's been able to do has really shown much return.
Why is it that Donald Trump, in your assessment, is still leading on this issue, according to the polls as well? Is it fear? I mean, he used fear to his advantage in 2016, talking about undocumented immigrants committing crimes. He had I believe they were called angel mothers behind